Did you know there's a town in the US where you have to drive through another country just to reach the rest of your own state? Or that there's a place where gravity seems to work in reverse? And let's not forget about the bizarre case of a US town that borders not just two, but three different states, creating a geographic oddity that confuses even the locals. America is filled with strange and fascinating geographic quirks, borders that don't make logical sense, isolated pockets of land that shouldn't exist, and natural phenomena so bizarre that even scientists struggle to explain them. Some of these anomalies were created by historical accidents, while others are the result of nature playing tricks on the landscape. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the most mind-bending geographic discoveries in the United States. Some of these places might seem straight out of a sci-fi novel, but they're all very real. And number 3 will completely change the way you look at a certain state. Let's start with Point Roberts, Washington, a tiny slice of American land with a serious accessibility problem. Despite being fully part of the United States, it's physically separated from the rest of Washington, meaning that if you want to drive to another American town, you have no choice but to pass through Canada first. This oddity happened back in 1846, when the US and Britain agreed on the 49th parallel as the dividing line between the US and Canada. But in their haste to set the border, they accidentally stranded Point Roberts, a small tip of a peninsula, on the Canadian side. The result? A town that is undeniably American, yet cut off from its own country. Living in Point Roberts means dealing with international border crossings daily. Imagine needing a passport just to go grocery shopping, visit a doctor, or even drop your kids off at school. In fact, some students in Point Roberts attend school in Washington, meaning they have to cross the US-Canada border 4 times a day just to get an education. Even mail delivery and emergency services have to navigate this international puzzle. And if you ever want to leave by land, be prepared to drive through 30 miles of Canadian territory before finally re-entering the United States. You probably think of Kentucky as just a single state, but in reality, it's actually divided into 2 completely different and distinct time zones, Eastern Time and Central Time, causing all sorts of everyday confusion and a bit of disorientation for residents and travelers alike. If you're driving across the entire state, you'll either lose or gain an entire hour along the way, which may not seem like a huge deal at first, until you consider the strange and unexpected real-world effects that it causes for people living and working there. Some towns sit right on the invisible time zone border, which means that neighbors, schools, and businesses in close proximity to each other may operate on completely different clocks, creating a daily puzzle for everyone involved. For example, some gas stations in border towns operate an entire hour ahead or behind their neighboring businesses located just across the street, making it difficult to stay on schedule and plan accordingly. Imagine clocking out from work in one time zone, driving just a few minutes down the road to your destination, and suddenly realizing that you're now an hour ahead or behind without even realizing it, which can throw off your entire day. And when it comes to celebrating New Year's Eve, some lucky Kentucky residents get to ring in the new year twice, once in Central Time, and then again just an hour later in Eastern Time, essentially giving them the chance to experience the magic of the midnight countdown twice in one night. You've probably heard of Four Corners, that famous spot where Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah all meet at a single point. But have you ever heard of a place where 3 states actually converge right inside a small town? Welcome to Kentucky Bend, a strange and intriguing little patch of land shaped by the winding, twisting Mississippi River, where things are geographically more complicated than you might think. Here, the borders of Kentucky, Missouri, and Tennessee all overlap in one of the most geographically awkward and unusual ways imaginable, creating a situation that's hard to believe unless you see it in person. But here's the catch. Kentucky Bend is completely and totally cut off from the rest of Kentucky, separated in an almost surreal way. In fact, the only practical way to reach this unusual place is by traveling through Tennessee or by taking a boat along the winding river, which makes it seem even more isolated. Even though it's technically part of Kentucky, it feels more like a remote, nearly unreachable island, far away from the state it legally belongs to. Even weirder than all that, the tiny town has a population of only about 18 people, making it one of the most sparsely populated areas in the country. Living here means dealing with the strange and often challenging reality of being part of a state government that's miles away and nearly impossible to reach by road, leaving the residents to navigate their own isolated existence. There's a strange road in Pennsylvania where, if you stop your car at the bottom of a hill, put it in neutral, and let go of the brake, something truly bizarre happens. Your car will start rolling uphill instead of rolling down as you'd expect. This mysterious and baffling spot, known as Gravity Hill, has left visitors scratching their heads and utterly confused for decades, with people constantly wondering how such an unbelievable phenomenon is even possible. While scientists explain that it's just an optical illusion, a clever trick of perspective that makes the downhill slope appear to be going uphill instead, locals living nearby aren't so sure, and they still can't quite believe the simple explanation. Many locals claim they can physically feel their cars being pulled upward by an invisible force, defying logic, reason, and gravity itself in a way that seems almost impossible. Regardless of what the actual explanation is, Gravity Hill has become a must-visit destination for curious and adventurous travelers from all over, eager to experience the unexplainable and mind-boggling event firsthand. Imagine swimming across a large lake and suddenly realizing you're now in another country. That's exactly what happens at Lake of the Woods, a massive and vast body of water that straddles the border between Minnesota and Canada, creating a unique and unexpected geographic situation. But here's where things get even stranger and more complicated. Because of the lake's unusual and irregular shape, there's a tiny slice of Minnesota that's completely cut off from the rest of the U.S., isolated in a way that makes it seem almost like its own world. This area, called the Northwest Angle, holds the unusual title as the northernmost point of the contiguous United States, but it's only accessible by traveling through Canada, making it a geographical puzzle of sorts. For the handful of people who live there, daily life comes with an unusual and somewhat inconvenient requirement. They must check in with customs officials whenever they leave or return, a process that becomes routine despite its oddness. This means that even simple trips to buy groceries or visit a doctor involve a border crossing every single time, turning what should be ordinary errands into complicated international journeys. Surrounded by water and foreign land on every side, the Northwest Angle is one of the most geographically isolated places in America, making it a true anomaly on the map, something that stands out as an oddity among more familiar territories. The United States is an incredibly vast and expansive country, and with that immense size comes some truly bizarre and inexplicable geographic oddities that are hard to believe. From strange towns that require international travel just to reach the rest of their own state, to unusual roads where gravity seems to work in reverse and defy all logical explanation, these anomalies serve as constant reminders that geography is often far stranger and more unbelievable than anything we could ever imagine in fiction. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. And if you're craving more wild geography facts like this, make sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe for even more map mysteries. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.